I am here in Regina, Saskatchewan, in Canada. And, well, hello, everyone. It's an honor and a delight to be able to speak to you today. I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that it would have been much nicer to meet face-to-face in Perth, Australia. But seeing everyone here on this online platform is a fantastic opportunity for which I'm very thankful. It also aligns quite well with what I'm intending to speak to you about today, and that is the use of online video as a resource to enhance our teaching. I will be focusing specifically on the more personal spaces that have been created and consumed by a growing number of people as the result of COVID-19 lockdowns and social isolation over the last 2 years. And I'm very sorry that I cannot share my screen with you. So there is a link in the questions bar to the right where you can download the slides. Of course, you have to time them for yourselves as we move along, but I think thematically it will be obvious. So my presentation is not a formal report on research findings, but rather I'm giving you an inspirational talk that draws on my own experiences and reflections as a beginning content creator and seasoned consumer, and as a social anthropologist teaching at a university of primarily undergraduate instruction in Canada. At the center of my focus lies the world's second largest search machine or search engine after Google, namely YouTube. The streaming video service is no longer the sole hangout for teenage video gamers who upload hours of live streams, and believe me, I know about that because I have 2 sons who are very much into that. But instead, it has become one of the world's leading user-generated knowledge repositories on everything. In true YouTube fashion, this talk is broken up into brief segments, which can be accessed through the timestamp links in the description below once this is on YouTube. And I will begin with YouTube as participatory pedagogy, where I will talk about past uses of the platform in teaching, then look at the rise of YouTube as a friend, which deals with my thesis that COVID has expanded the reasons people go to the platform, before moving on to the power of evergreen content, which I discuss. I'll be discussing the split between YouTube and newer platforms such as TikTok. And then I take a look at how this ties into the classroom, so why it is relevant to teaching at college and university levels, before touching on the learning curve of getting started, where I will describe what is needed to get started as a content creator on YouTube. So let me start with YouTube as participatory pedagogy. In 2011, Jeffrey Carter and Sarah Arroyo wrote a paper in the academic journal Computers and Composition about where they thought participatory pedagogy, they talk about participatory pedagogy on YouTube, and where they think it's going to be at 2020, so 9 years earlier. And they focus on the genre of memes and on how different consumers of such memes become creators in their own right, as they add layer after layer of interpretive sound, imagery, and text, or simply edit the material in new ways to continue the evolving curation of an original soundbite or news section, often with sarcasm and lots of humor. So here in this context, learning is open-ended and participatory because we cannot ever predict what meanings will emerge as we move along. Although YouTube serves as a repository of our collective memory, it is no longer the king of memes. In fact, in 2020 and 2021, I think this title clearly went to the video sharing platforms, among them TikTok and Instagram video now, which I will discuss in a little bit. In a 2019 article, Mark Jackman writes about the powerful use of video available on YouTube as illustrative material in teaching psychology at the university level, and really any other topic as well, subject. He focuses on the video's ability to clarify complex concepts, to visualize the abstract, and the ability to draw on first-hand recordings of living and dead theorists. I think a favorite of many instructors. These aspects are less participatory, but they can nonetheless be quite engaging. In an article from earlier this year, so that's 2021, entitled YouTube Learning and Transformative Critical Pedagogy, Ahmed Toby shows how the use of YouTube can inspire learners to independently continue researching topics through further searches even after class is over. But he points out that this kind of participatory pedagogy becomes transformative only if it follows clear philosophical and pedagogical foundations, or it will amount to little more than sheer capitalist consumption. I couldn't agree more with that. So while participatory pedagogy maintains its essential importance in online and offline classrooms, the prevalence of YouTube as a medium used for quick video uploads and re-uploads, as mentioned by Carter Arroyo in 2011, has really declined. Today, one of the strongest ways to participate in YouTube video culture is arguably through the comment section, in which consumers or viewers offer praise and critique, ask pointed questions, and actively help guide the content creation of further videos through direct feedback with the content creators or channel owners. With pop-up alert functions working like a charm these days, content creators can follow their viewers' comments in real time. And to limit participation in video culture to a comment section may seem counterintuitive in an age when everyone has a camera and respond by making their own videos. But in my experience, it's not counterproductive or counterintuitive at all. YouTube videos increasingly focus on thought-out, mid-length content, sometimes even longer content, rather than on short-length, time-sensitive, back-and-forth messages. There are just better platforms for that these days. So that takes me to the rise of YouTube as a friend. What's really meant by that? COVID-19 has really messed with our physical movement patterns, routines, and generally with how we spend our time, free time or not so free time, at a distance from each other, or even in total isolation. The internet is full of memes, comedic videos, and political critiques that have emerged over the past 2 years on this very topic. My anthropologist colleague Karen Penesi at the University of Western Ontario just published an interesting research article on YouTube and TikTok verbal art during the pandemic, a recent development that arguably relies on changes in how much time people are now spending on daily grazing in video streaming platforms. But it is more than pure boredom that we cure with streaming video. It helps us connect with the lived experiences of others. It puts us in the kitchens, the gardens, the garages of would-be friends. So what we seem to be missing most, I think, in this time is spending more time with our friends. And in many cases, it is not just any friends, but friends with whom we share a hobby or a common interest. And YouTube combines these two desires by hosting content creators who not only discuss interests they share with us, but who invite us into their daily lives and into their homes, much like we did before the pandemic. And I'm not sure where each of you are at with the pandemic right now, since this is quite a global gathering. I'm an avid lover, personally, of the outdoors, and I have a deep appreciation for photography, including photographic gear. So my examples of YouTuber friends today are 3 photographers who cater to precisely these hankerings. They are men and women of various ages who fiddle with cameras and who take me along on walks to try out and discuss new techniques, but also to just talk about life and where it's at. So 3 examples I have selected illustrate how YouTubers cater to people like me who enjoy learning through what feels like friendship. Friendship relies on persistence, I think. Ideally, friends stick around. We watch each other grow over time. We observe each other change, which in turn bonds us together. We witness success and we witness failure, and we follow each other through major life stages. Today's YouTubers build on this pattern. We literally follow them or subscribe to them as they live their lives, move from one place to another, have children, get divorced, battle with depression, all while discussing cameras or mascara or whatever. There's a reason the number 1 recommendation for any successful YouTube channel today is to persist, to be persistent, to post 1 video per week or month, and to keep this up throughout the year. My colleague Deborah Kirschkan-Litao at the Université du Québec à Montréal shows how the same persistence also undergirds the growing draw of online gaming platforms. But let me now turn to these 3 YouTube examples. Dani O'Connor is a young British woman who recently quit her customer service job at a zoo and museum in London to take up wildlife photography in Sweden. She's an outspoken fan of squirrels with a love for zoology, and she uses the crowdsourcing platform Patreon to help fund her adventures. Her 15 to 20-minute long videos, several of which are now quite polished and more like short documentaries really, have amassed some 2.2 million views to date. But even as her work is increasingly more professional, Dani continues to give us insight into her personal learning process or path as a novice wildlife photographer. Not only do we get to see beautiful animals, we learn about photographic techniques as she's learning them herself, and often in the presence of more experienced individuals whom she visits on her travels. Her followers seem to be invested in keeping up with both her life story, but also with the new skills they encounter through this friendship. You can follow Dani's channel at Dani Connor Wild. My next example is of a different age group and a different gender. It's Morton Hilmer, who is a middle-aged man and a long-term professional wildlife photographer from Denmark. Before coming to photography, Hilmer was a Danish Special Forces soldier, which now finds reflection in his outdoor adventures and expeditions into the Arctic. But the reason I choose to profile him here is his very simple and relaxed style of sharing his daily life with his viewers and of discussing many of their questions from the comment sections in his slow 15 to 60-minute videos. One of the best examples of this type of intimate conversation comes from a video entitled Questions and Answers, Favorite Photographers, Future, Family, etc. In this 1-hour video, we see Morton with his little dog Björn sitting in front of a fireplace in what looks like a cabin somewhere perhaps in the woods. He's drinking tea from a thermos flask, and his conversation is inviting, it's warm, and quite relational. So far, about 26.8 million people have viewed this channel. My final example comes from Alex Soth. Alex Soth is a world-famous photojournalist, and he lives in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And he, like so many of us, has been cooped up in his home during COVID-19. Rather than complain about it, he has taken to philosophically reviewing photo books on YouTube, often in relation to current affairs. In other words, he picks up a book from his vast collection and simply starts looking at pictures while talking about them from the perspective of a photographer and engaged citizen. We cannot always see his face or his surroundings. His camera is pointed directly at the book. But what might seem boring, even lecture-like, has invited, in actuality, over the last 9 months, some 250,000 visiting viewers of his 20 to 40 minute long flip through a book sessions. Quite amazing. So Dani Connor, Morton Hilmer, and Alex Soth are tethered to photography in different ways, obviously. But it isn't the photography I wish to discuss here. Instead, I want to highlight through their examples how YouTube has increasingly become a vehicle for learning through calm, reflective, intimate, and friend-centered content creation. Of course, there are literally millions of counterexamples available on YouTube, but I have chosen these because they're indicative of a trend and they lend themselves to adaptation in our own classrooms. Some of the best anonymous teaching assessments I have received from students over the years come from a theory course in which I follow a combination of Morton Hilmer's and Alex Soth's coffee table-like discussions. The calm environment, the close circle of friends, and the focus not so much on each other, but on a common book, for instance, resulted in students' feedback along the lines of, I loved this course. It almost felt like going to a coffee time each week, where we would sit around a table discussing things I'd never thought about in my life. Comments like these highlight how a personal touch like that of the coffee table format can help combat notions of impersonal and required learning. In this context, engaging new and challenging ideas occurs in tandem with other desires, such as a deeper social connection, authentic experiences, real-life stories, etc. In the classroom, students are able to pose questions directly, but oftentimes deeper content actually requires some distancing for reflection before questions can be asked or answered. The comment section on YouTube accommodates this very well, and it archives them as well. It allows others to chime in well into the future. And that takes me to the power of evergreen content. Evergreen content, YouTube is full, let me just say, YouTube is full of time-sensitive contributions. What I mean are commentaries on current events, whether political, social, or technological, which will be obsolete in a year's time, except perhaps for historical purposes. But evergreen content refers to videos that could be watched 10 years from now with little loss of value, if any. All three YouTube examples I've shared with you now fall into this category. They speak to skills, to experiences that are timeless. In terms of YouTube view counts, such content could potentially explode in years to come. You might have very few visitors now, but in 5 years, somebody discovers it and it hits the fan, and thousands of people start watching it. But even from a pedagogical and curriculum-based perspective, this format lends itself to teaching in many ways. Firstly, what you prepared for one course can be plugged freely and readily into another course. It's kind of a module on its own. And secondly, what was prepared several years ago can still be used today because of its evergreen quality. And finally, what was created for a closed course is also useful on the open internet, and you can use it for general global knowledge dissemination, opening up education that way. So much of the evergreen content we find on YouTube is not only good for a long time, it also doesn't seem to rush the present. While short, snippy videos may accrue lots of clicks, and while they can be thought-provoking and politically agitating, few of them are truly memorable because they do not properly accommodate the persona of the individual. So what I'm talking about here is not a dynamic infographic or infomercial that is sped up and jump cut to a bare minimum, but I'm talking about narrative accounts that provide social, personal, and environmental context, and in which we come to know the personal tics and behavioral particularities of specific individuals we want to follow. Here, it doesn't matter if the life trajectory we're following took place in the last 15 years or maybe just 5 years ago. It's more about sequence and the possibility to relate, even if the author may no longer be able to respond to queries in the comment section because they have died or they have left YouTube. Many of these qualities stand in direct contrast to platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat. By limiting video contributions to 15 seconds, 60 seconds, or even 3 minutes, they're highly limited in the mode of content they can deliver. A 15-second time cap can be perfect for humorous cultural critique. It lends itself to memes and to on-the-go participatory pedagogy, yes. It is also ideal in terms of lowering the content creator threshold, since it's arguably less intimidating to produce 15 seconds of content on your iPhone with an anonymous computerized voiceover than it is to narrate one's life experience in a well-edited, well-lit 40-minute high-quality video. Reflections on this recent split between YouTube and TikTok or Instagram video culture can be found on the internet everywhere. In fact, Canadian YouTube celebrity photographer Peter McKinnon just recently addressed this question quite poignantly in a 2001 video entitled "A New Era of Making Videos Online." But let me conclude by drawing the connection to how this ties into the classroom. In my experience, many students are deeply familiar with a combination of boredom, drudgery, and/or fear when it comes to class time. Boredom, because the material does not strike the student as relevant. Drudgery, because the content is required but not really desired. And fear, because one might be called on called on in class, and time is tight as always, and few are truly prepared. Of course, YouTube is not going to fix this for us, but a relaxed discussion over coffee or tea in a log cabin that rehashes difficult concepts covered in assigned readings can work wonders. In fact, this is the kind of luxury we usually reserve only for our graduate students. We may bring along some of our MA or PhD students to a field seminar in the back country, where over tea cooked on fire, we discuss a series of research articles. Although the papers may be dense, boredom, drudgery, and fear seem to recede in such settings. We do not usually have the luxury of taking larger groups of undergraduate students into the bush or into less formal settings than the classroom. YouTube videos, like the ones presented by Morton Hilmer, are a serious alternative, especially in a flipped classroom. Here, such a video can replace a live lecture that would have taken place during class time, freeing up time and space for a more detailed Q&A or hands-on activity. Unlike a live lecture, students are able to replay specific sections of the YouTube video by clicking on the timestamp links in the description if you so choose to place those. Students can also share their own timestamps, linking to different sections of the same talk. For instance, they can link to every time you touch your glasses or take a sip of tea. In my own teaching, I'm still far away from what I now envision as ideal learning through friendship videos. But as an instructor, one of the most powerful selling points for me is the ability to edit my videos. Not only can I edit the audio, but I can also insert silences, visual transitions, and images to think with. I can bring in music and illustrative sound clips of original languages and conversations recorded in the field. I'm able to include more detail in the same time and with greater precision than if I were to teach the material live in class. I can also rewatch the video myself in preparation for a class in which I will work with students face-to-face. Okay, so don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating for pre-recorded video to take the place of live student-instructor interaction. But having video as a resource can allow you more quality time with your students than you would have if you presented the initial material in class for the first time in class. So I have a few notes on the learning curve of getting started, but I think I'll just round it up here that in a nutshell, when I say YouTube as a friend, what I really mean is a new way of using the global video sharing platform to teach through a kind of friendship model. And this is a type of participatory pedagogy that has taken a decisive step away from the world of short meme videos and which is embracing fuller, narrative, real-life content. Thanks to its pace and length, it lends itself to deeper conversations about curricular materials, especially in flipped classrooms and online teaching, while engaging students on a more personable and authentic level that transcends the formality of the classroom. Its evergreen content makes it relevant from year to year, serving the instructor, in this case myself, time and effort down the road, while being useful simultaneously within closed courses and openly on the internet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. If we were in person, we would give a little round of applause. So just treat yourself to a. Do you have a soundtrack of applause that we could play right now? So.
I don't need one, but that's fine. I would be happy to field any questions or comments.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have several, but I would like to just kind of see if any of the people here. So if anybody wants to go ahead and unmute yourself, and we have a few minutes for questions. Go ahead. You may unmute yourself and ask your question.
I was wondering if you could tell us what software or apps you use for editing.
Yes. Hi, Mary. Thank you for that question. I'm personally a committed minimalist, and so I try to use as few applications and computers as possible and cameras. So I only have two devices. I have an iPad and I have an iPhone, but the same would work with obviously other devices. For software, I don't use big programs. I just use little apps that can be downloaded from the App Store. So because I'm an iOS user with Apple, I use editing software that's specific to the iOS environment. There are lots of different very affordable programs. Usually they're, in Canada, I would pay about $30 for a good editing program. And let me just see, to give you an example, I can edit this on my phone. I can edit it on the tablet. You can use iMovie, which comes with every Apple device. You can, let's see. I started out with iMovie, but now I also use a few other applications. Hold them up.
As you're pulling that up, Alex, if you can handle another question similar,
Yes.
do you track any usage of the videos by your students, and how do you use that information?
Yes, I do. I use YouTube both closed and publicly. So I have a YouTube channel, which you can visit. If you search for Alex Oler, you'll find it. Those are publicly accessible videos, and most of those are not actually lecture videos. The lecture videos I don't make public always.
Sure.
And most of those are just anonymous links that I then embed in our Moodle platform, so students who are part of a course have access to them. And because I know the number of students I have in the course, I can also see the number of clicks in YouTube on the back end of YouTube. And so I know how many people watched. I can see, get a weekly report. I see how long they watched, how much they watched. So I get a pretty good idea of students' engagement with the material. Filmic Pro is an application that enhances your camera abilities on your phone. And Lumafusion is an editing software suite that's available for iPhone and for iPad and for other mobile devices. So you can edit videos quite professionally on the fly, basically from the palm of your hand. Lumafusion.
Lumafusion and Filmic Pro. Okay, enhances the camera. That's great. Good to know. Other questions?
I have a question. Hi, Alex.
Andra?
I really appreciate this particular presentation. I had students recently do an assignment, and I gave them a wide variety of choices of how they could do it, and several of them created YouTube videos. So I'm just kind of wondering about the whether or not YouTube would be a good way of having students create possible, like, learning diaries or journals throughout the entire course to kind of keep up with their thinking about a particular subject.
I think that is a fantastic idea, Chandra. Thank you. This ties very much into what I was trying to say. This is what, for me, is the notion of YouTube as friend. We are friends in that we follow each other over a progress of development, of personal development. And so, if somebody started a degree with me and started watching my YouTube videos, they will probably not see so much gray hair as they will at the end of the course. The idea is that we all change, and these videos, like you say, they are diaries. They document inevitably, even if we don't intend that to be part of the video. It does show, and that is what gives gravitas, what gives volume to the video, what makes it authentic. You can't hide these things, and that's good, right? So I think the idea of having students make short videos in which they can reflect on where they're at in their thinking, in their experience with materials, with content at a certain point in the course is fantastic. And then to see how that progresses. It also gives them, it documents, it archives their own learning process, and they can go back in time and watch earlier videos and reflect on how their thinking has changed since then. So I think it's a fantastic way. I have to warn my students, and I think you would probably too, YouTube is a very public format, and it invites often very hostile comments. I think comments have improved on YouTube. People maybe practice a better etiquette now, and it also depends on the topics that you discuss. But you do open yourself to a world of critique, and not all of it is constructive. So you may have to think about whether you want to make these videos publicly available, whether you want to list them or keep them unlisted, and just save the link to the video and share it within the class. I know some students are quite vulnerable in that regard, and so YouTube is open waters. It's the open ocean, and there are sharks out there. So it's also open to vast opportunity, and you could start a following and speak into the lives and contribute to the learning processes of people around the world. So the opportunities are vast, but the potential risks are too.
Thank you so much for that. That is a really great answer on both sides. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Chandra. Yeah, if you want to address Chloe's comment in the chat.
Yeah,
and then,
Chloe,
Alex, would you also share your email address in the chat if you don't mind?
Yes, of course. Chloe, thank you for your question. You say, I could definitely relate to the drudgery comment as an undergraduate student. I was wondering if your favorite, most successful coffee time class would be achievable in larger lectures or undergraduate courses. As a student, I have a difficult time engaging in courses that have a larger student body and find this coffee time concept fascinating. Yes, Chloe, in fact, that's why I'm here today talking about coffee time on YouTube, because what you're describing, these large classes with 100+ students, no, you can't have that coffee time. I mean, you can perform a coffee time on stage, so to say, but it's not the same. So that's why I look to YouTube, because by flipping the classroom in large undergraduate courses, I'm able to have this coffee time just with you and whoever else is watching it. But for the sake of the time being as we watch, it's just you, Chloe, and me. And we're having this discussion in which, I can share about my ideas as we read this book that you have also read, presumably. And then you can comment, and others can comment. And so we replicate, it's not the same, but we replicate a kind of friendship and intimacy, intimate environment as friends, discussing ideas that we could never have in this massive classroom. And so if the video can take that place, then, we still have to deal with the big classroom, but we did have that coffee time, and it may be the much more memorable part of the course than the things that we did in a massive lecture hall. Yes, it's funny. On the one hand, we are, in the 21st century, we have all this amazing technology, but then we can't even share our screens. So I'm going to write down my email address and show it on the screen.
And put it on the screen. That's fantastic. Yes, or you could type it in the chat. But yeah, whatever's easier for you.
True. Okay.
We have a lot of people with the initials. There you go, alex.oehler@uregina.ca.
That's right. And I'll type it in the chat as well. The funny thing is that the chat somehow half disappears on my screen too. Okay, so this is my email, and if you search for Alex Oehler on YouTube, you will also find my channel, which is about anthropology beyond the human.
Okay. Are you finding, this is Raj, so as I'm an educational developer, faculty developer, so I'm always interested in thinking about how do innovations that a particular faculty member come up, how does one do diffusion of innovation, right? So how do we get the sociologists and the historians and the political scientists at URegina, how do your colleagues view this kind of activity, and how do we spread the sense of, so in all those large undergraduate classes, the Chloes of the world get this coffee time feel?
Yeah. I haven't heard of anyone else experimenting with the coffee time feel,
Okay.
People might have different terms for it. That's just what students fed back to me through their feedback, that they said this is what it felt like to them, and it is what they loved most about the course. And so, of course, I took up on that, and I'm trying to develop this into a new format now. In terms of sharing with colleagues, there are, we have colleagues in psychology, for instance, who are really quite cutting edge on using social media to kind of stir the pot. But most of that is more in the Twitter sphere or on Snapchat. Most of that is really kind of condensed videos, how to communicate as much information as you can in a short period of time, which is very useful. Often students actually are looking for that. They want a summary of a concept and who is the best at providing it in 3 minutes. And you can find some amazing feats on YouTube and anywhere else and on the internet. But what I'm trying to get at with this coffee time and YouTube as a friend here is quite different. It's not just condensing information. It's not just the facts and bullet lists, but it is invoking, our emotional being as well. And it is showing our true colors. And, I might have a nervous tick or, things that I'm not proud about in my demeanor. And students will point that out or they will observe that. And that's okay. That's good. I'm a real person. They are real people. And I want to know them as real people, not just as numbers, not as people who have subscribed to a course and paid their dues. And no, it has to be, for me at least, to be a truly enriching learning process, something in which we can touch the soul of the other, something that is real, an actual sharing of our lives. This is very precious time, I could be spending this time in a very different place, but I've chosen to be here with you and share in your precious time today online. This is no less worthy than any other place we could ever meet. And so that's kind of what I want to take to this. And it's quite fresh, which is why I'm talking about it here. So I don't know yet to what extent other colleagues in other disciplines, let alone in anthropology, will make use of this. But I do see that since COVID-19, this is a real trend on YouTube. And there seems to be a great hunger in the general populace of YouTube and video culture worldwide in this very intimate, personal sharing of life and using that as a framework to talk about concepts that we're teaching.
Amazing. You will be hearing from me because I've actually had a research project in the back of my mind for a while that I haven't had the right partner to kind of do it with. I actually have a teaching American college students Indian classical music channel.
Wow.
Cool. And you talk about something reflective and deep and,
Yes.
But I love the phrase that you use, evergreen content, right? That is evergreen content. And coming out of places like Alabama in the US, there's hundreds of hits from India of people wanting to learn, reconnect with their classical music roots and finding our presentation of the music that I created for the American college student the most accessible way, right? It's not the most polished or professional, but it's accessible to the common person who wants to engage with classical music, right? And so, I'm a physicist by training and an educational developer and teach Indian classical music on the side. But it just from your comments, it's like, I'd love to talk more about how we might collaborate on something.
Great, let's do it. Fantastic.
Yeah, so.
Chandra asked, what's the cost of a YouTube channel? It's free. It doesn't cost anything. You just sign up. It's like a Facebook account or whatever. And you don't get a direct URL until I think you have over 100 subscribers or something like that. But in the About tab, there is a URL that is yours. And you can share that on social media so people can find you.
Chandra, just one little word. I don't know what institution you're at, but at our institution, we are a Google Suite institution here in the US. However, YouTube is not part of our Google Suite. So if you want to set up a YouTube channel, you cannot do it with your official university email address. You have to do it with a private Gmail address, right? So we have faculty, because we have other supported university video platforms. So just, if you want to do something officially for your classes and stuff, so easily accessible to students, just talk to your IT people to just see how that's handled. Because if you're especially a Google Suite school, the rules are a little bit different sometimes. So
That's good to know. Thank you.
Talking about rules, it's probably a good idea to inquire with the copyright manager at your institution or with someone else who knows about this. Different institutions have different regulations in terms of what can be shared on private YouTube channels. I am in the lucky position that our institution doesn't have very many restrictions. I simply have to remove all kinds of, branding, university branding. So it has to be just my personal material. But under academic freedom, I can put anything I want on YouTube, so long as it does not actually make the impression of institutional endorsement. So those are some things you may want to look out for as you start using YouTube. I know that some institutions also are quite strict on any kind of educational material that was created while on payroll. So the idea of research and educational materials belonging to the institution rather than the individual. In my case, here at the University of Regina, that's not the case. I can share my teaching materials freely. I simply have to remove any association with the institution, which is very easy to do.
So thank you for that. That's definitely a consideration. My good friend Jen Freeberg is on here as well. She's the director of a teaching and learning center at Illinois State. And one question that always comes up as faculty developers, the time that you're putting into developing these resources, right? Where does that count in things like promotion and tenure efforts or your annual evaluation, right? Where would you list your YouTube channel effort?
To be honest, as a sly content producer, I would say it can count multiple times in multiple columns. If you're creating evergreen lectures, let's say, specifically not lecture-like, but they are based on content, on scripts that you would use in lectures, then I would count that as course development, because these are elements that I will be using in my courses. But if they can also, because of the way they were made, function on YouTube in a public sphere, then they're also education without borders, and they count as global outreach. And so and because I mix in a lot of data that I get from my own primary research in my teaching, because we have research-informed teaching, it's also a way of public dissemination of my research. So it counts in, I put it on my CV all the time, in external funding applications, and of course also in tenure applications. So you can, if you place it right, you can have the same material count multiple.
Right. Wonderful. And Jen will be thrilled to hear that, because of course she's published work on public scholarship, right? So that's another thing that we want. This is definitely a form of public scholarship, and as people do ISSOTL work and then just kind of push it out there through all venues that we'll call non-traditional in terms of the ways that universities typically look at this material. So thank you for those insights as well.
Yeah, I think the trick is to write a script or to have an outline that from the get-go is written with a mind to multiple applicability. So it's not too specific, it's not time-based, it doesn't address any kind of last week's class or anything like that. It's always generic enough that it can serve a public audience or a more specific audience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. I think we've had a fascinating discussion and a very thought-provoking presentation. Thank you, Alex. It's great to meet you. You'll be hearing from me definitely. And to our attendees, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And hopefully in a couple of days, you'll hear about where our next conference is going to be. And hopefully that'll, in 2022, we will have opportunities to actually have coffee together, right, as well as discuss these great ideas.
Thank you, Raj, for moderating this. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.